Good Wednesday to you, everybody in com/gov 603. Welcome to week, boom, bam, 14. 14. Hmm. Let's not get things out of order here. All right, what do we have? Oh, Rocky Mountain National Park Cup, a fine place to visit. All right, week 14. Which means we only have, roughly speaking, 2 weeks left of class. And in fact, really, in terms of active work, we only have 1 week left of class because and that's this one coming up because I'm going to give you, time in the, last weekish or so to finish your papers and prepare for the exam. Okay. So you don't what's happening to me. So, yes, sorry. You're going to have a little to do over the week of Thanksgiving. Okay, that's just how it goes. So, but you won't have much to do over the week of Thanksgiving, and I will post that material and have it up and ready for you because I am going to be on the road during that week and taking care of some family stuff. I will be in touch by way of email, except when you'll be able to reach me, except I'll probably really be off grid, like Monday the 25th. Okay. But you'll have your material before then anyways. Okay. All right. So in these last, 2 weeks ish, make sure that your paper is finished and ready to go because they just, as I've said before, they ride me like a circus pony when it comes to getting grades in. And I just do not have a lot of wiggle room if you've got issues that you're trying to work out. Also, make sure that you're preparing and you are ready for the examination, right? And the exam is going to be, comprehensive. It'll be like the midterm exam in that it will be drawn from the discussion sections. And so, yes, it will be, replete with material from the midterm exam, but no, it will not be the very same stuff from the midterm exam. Okay, I had somebody ask me that once, and they said, when you say that it'll include stuff from the midterm, do you mean that it'll just have the questions from the midterm? It's like, well, sort of. I mean, they won't be new creations, but they're not going to be exactly the same thing. However, if you study the questions and the answers from the midterm, that is a great way to prepare for that part of the exam. And then on the other side, study the questions and answers as revealed in the videos, which we're going to get here into in just a minute, for the questions forward of the midterm exam, which is about like week 8 or 9. Okay. All right, everybody, let's take a look at what we're going to do this week, and then we'll take a really quickie look at what you did last week and see if we can add to it. Okay, so for this week, I've given you some questions that I hope will help you focus on your research paper. Now, last week I said that, I was going to give you an opportunity to do some qualitative research. And I looked at that and I thought, we could do that. But I know this is likely not your only course and the need to complete the paper. I thought, okay. Let me give you some material. Let me give you a focus that will help you hone in on that paper, on that project. So that's what you're going to find in terms of the readings and also in terms of questions, right? And I see, from looking at it, I see that some of you are already answering the questions, which is great. And, some of these questions are just subjective, like question 4 asks you, which of the two broad categories of research, qualitative or quantitative, are you drawn to and why? So a question like that might morph into a question on the final exam in which you're asked to explain the difference between qualitative and quantitative in a way that's really clear, succinct and clear. So when you look at these things, yes, I want to know, I want to hear what you have to think, okay? But also remember that it's part of sort of the greater arc of what we're doing here in this class, okay? And then, you're going to be asked about delivery structures in terms of paper. How do you get your point across? Likewise, question number one, it might seem a little silly, but I'm going to give you a couple of sentences, or giving you a couple of sentences, I should say. And I'm going to ask you, how do you straighten these things out? Okay. How do you rewrite and rephrase? Okay. And redo the sentence. This is like, okay, it depends on how you want to look at it. All right. Now, for me as a writer, call me weird. I love writing. I love the process of writing. Writing in and of itself is an activity, whether you consider yourself a writer or not, or you like writing or you don't. Okay. But what writing does is it organizes one's thoughts in the brain, right? Because you can't turn the conceptual into the material without organization. Now, what do I mean by that? The conceptual and the material. I'm just looking around here for something brief. Okay, here's a little Post-it note that I'm put up to remind myself of something. Okay, so no, I didn't make the Post-it note. That's not what I mean by the material. But I took the raw elements of the material, Post-it note, trusty HB pencil, and I created something new. Okay. Now, I don't think about it in the way I'm going to explain it to you here very quickly all the time when I do it. But whenever and whatever the process, whether it's writing or baking a cake, painting a picture, taking a photograph, anything. Whenever you move through a process of taking the conceptual, that is something that exists, as a non-material thing, and then turning it into a material thing, that is a reflection, that is an image, that is a manifestation of our divine nature. And by the way, we're not entirely the only creatures that have this capacity, because the divine nature of God, the Creator, is reflected in all creations. It is uniquely reflected, uniquely manifest in the creation that's us. So I love writing. Again, now every time I don't want to say every time I sit down to write, and I'm suggesting to you, when you have a paper to write, you're like, oh, I feel so godlike. Okay, that's not what I'm getting at. But when you go through that process, when you take something that's conceptual and you turn it into something physical, you have to organize the thoughts. Okay, so this is why not only writing, but writing and rewriting is good for you as a thinker. All right. And then the second reason is, you need to practice organizing your thoughts. You need to get them out there faster. You need to get them out there in a way that matches what's in your head. All right. But also, you could have the best idea or the most insightful take, or let's say that you go on and you're a researcher and you're working in political science, and the most genius analysis of whatever the phenomenon ever. If you can't explain it to others, it has either, and I'm going to make a bold statement here, it has no value or significantly diminished value. I mean, let's assume, it's like a fantastic analysis or an idea. It's now an analysis, an idea, perspective that has significantly diminished value or no value, because it's like a gem, like a precious gem. You think like a diamond or a ruby or a sapphire or something. Okay, whatever your gem of choice. I wear two rings. One is my wedding band, which is gold. This one, you may have noticed, from time and again in videos, the little brown stuff here in the ring. Okay, woolly mammoth tooth. So not really precious stone, but it's like a precious stone locked inside of a box. If it's not seen and appreciated, it doesn't have value. So that's another, that's those two reasons. You really only need the two. And yeah, it can be hard. Okay, it can be difficult. But if you can't communicate it, if you can't communicate your thoughts well, or clear, that includes cogently and meaningfully and in a way that's compelling, like who wants to read this? Okay. You're at cross purposes with yourself. Okay. So that's what we're going to be focusing on this week. Okay. Let's take a look at the questions from last week. I've asked you again about some terms related to the empirical research process. You should have, mastery of these. Question number one, explain the following two terms: critical junction analysis and comparative historical analysis. And explaining the terms, refer to Capoccio's article and any outside sources that will help with your discussion. Okay, what's the point of this? When we talk about, especially when we get into qualitative research, and we talk about describing an event, okay, you can look at the event from a couple of different causal perspectives. Okay, let me say that again. You can look at the event from a couple of different causal perspectives, meaning what was it that happened that caused this event? All right. So Lane, you were one of the first ones to answer this question. Let's take you. Critical junction analysis is the historical analysis of a decision which alters the trajectory of an institution and promulgates an enduring path of dependency, or just alters the trajectory of an institution, period. These decisions are usually made by rulers, elites, or leaders during the time of instability. Okay. True. Now, and for everybody else, and Lane, because you and I have talked, and I know that you have a solid command of that which you write. But for everybody else, whether you're reading his answer or you're reading your own answer, make sure that you can explain it in plain English. Okay. So to critical junction analysis, this is the proposal, the proposition that when we talk about historical events, the question is, what's the ghost in the machine? What is the thing that causes things to happen? Critical junction analysis, as the name suggests, looks at events and says, it's almost like, the process of punctuated equilibrium. There's pressure building up in society. And then this one thing or this one person, and typically it focuses on those in power politically, which is how a lot of history has been written. I mean, I'm always amused when I hear, historians say, such and such ruler built this, edifice, cathedral or something. Okay, like I'm thinking of the great church in Constantinople, now the city of Istanbul, Hagia Sophia, the great church of divine wisdom, built by the Emperor Justinian in the 6th century. Okay, look, I can absolutely guarantee you that Justinian, the Roman emperor, who did happen to rule over the city and that part of the Roman Empire in the 500s, never laid a hand on a single stone that went into building that church. The reason it's expressed that way is this perception, this perspective of critical junction analysis. It's this one ruler, okay, a particular decision or an action or something. And that's the critical junction where this crosses this, okay? So Lane, you say an example would be Guatemala and El Salvador, where the leaders of these countries engaged in the capitalist economy through the export of coffee beans As the market continued to soar, these leaders privatized land, disenfranchised small farm owners and peasants, increased the military to protect their investment, set pathway to dependency military authoritative regimes. Okay. Now, by the way, when we say critical junction analysis, we don't have to be talking about, left-wing despotic rulers. We're talking about a individual, or it can be a single event. Okay. Comparative historical analysis is an approach to compare institutions, regimes, etc., through the analysis of their historical past. Okay, yes. Or likewise, and the category can be broader than that. Okay. And this isn't a criticism of you, Lane. You're exactly right. But a comparative historical analysis could compare large trends that develop within societies amongst people that solidify into institutions or social movements. Okay. A key feature of current implementation of CHAs using critical junction analysis. In this method, research looks for a pivotal decision in the patch which alter trajectory of politics and set a nation or institution on the course of path dependency, in essence, going back to the very beginning where the decision changed the political dynamics. Okay, that's fine. Okay. Does everybody understand that? All right. So really again, it's the question of what is the to put it this way, what is the engine in history? What is it the thing that makes things go, that makes things happen? Is it an individual? Okay. And then, like a whole string of them. So in other words, is it Napoleon as the individual? Are you thinking of that just tragic movie with Joaquin Phoenix, whom I really like as an actor, by the way? And no, I did not go see the second Joker film because it's not that I'm anything against Lady Gaga. I don't understand why it was done as a musical. And according, to the reviews I read, it was an absolute train wreck, but I digress. So is it a single individual like Napoleon, or is it the build up of social pressure that coalesces, into institutions and organizations, like, say, tensions between Britain and France, or the redirecting of the momentum of the French Revolution? So really, it's a question of, is it the individual that is responsible for the event, and then because of the actions of the individual, the circumstance play out? Or is it the building of circumstance that enables the individual? I mean, more recently, we might ask, was it Donald J. Trump, acting as Donald J. Trump, that secured the election of Donald J. Trump? Or, and I'm not taking anything away from any electoral win, or was it the coming together of various pressures that coalesced into social movements and events like inflation, influx of immigration across the borders, that made the situation favorable for the win of Donald J. Trump? How do you want to look at it? Okay, everybody understand that? Okay, good. Question number 2. According to Abdallah et al., why is identity important for political science research? Is identity best used as an independent or dependent variable? And if you didn't pick that out already, yes, this is a trick question. Okay. Let's see. Amber. Adela et al. State that identity is essential in political science as a way to explore how individuals establish social and political identities, explore already established identities in adults, and to expand the definition of social identity beyond ethics and cultural identification. The author does not specify if identity works better as an independent, dependent variable. Okay, that's not entirely true. Take a look back at the text. Okay, Charles. The concept of identity is interesting because of the work of some recent psychologists, sociologists, theologians claim that this sort of identity is the core way people approach life. Studies involving identity and political science assess the linkage between identity and action. These linkages are critical when studying sociological influence and process of change. Change from outside forces may be measured, in the number of muskets, tariffs, immigrations, et cetera, et cetera. Typically, identity uses a dependent variable, independent variable, and political research because it influences cues. This is me, not you, Charles. You wrote this perfectly well. Actions that lead to political outcome. But there are certainly political and sociological outcomes that lead to the formation of identity. Therefore, identity can be used as both an independent or dependent variable based on a research design. Correct. That's the tricky part of the question. Okay. Look, when we talk about political science, I mean, the word itself, politics, comes from the Greek word polis, which means the city. So it's the study of what goes on in the city. And when we say what goes on in the city, we're not talking about the building of buildings and this street that goes that way. Okay. What we're talking about here is the recognition, and the Greeks picked this up, and that's why they coined the term politics. Is there something fundamentally different about how humans behave when they come together and they start building these permanent structures, and then they stay there rather than moving around as hunter-gatherers, which, there are some peoples that still do that. Okay. But one of the markers that we've used, and you can say there's a certain artificiality to us, but it is what it is. One of the markers that we use to say, have people advanced by way of, and even the term civilization, because that comes from Kiwis, the Roman term for city. Have people advanced by way of adaptation to the environment in relationship to one another? How do we mark that? We go, is there a stratification of occupation? And this is one of the markers of living in a polis or a Kiwis, all right, is stratification of occupation. What does that mean, stratification of occupation? That means that you start getting groups of people that do specific things, and those groups of people don't do other things. For example, in the case of the early cities, you had some people that spent all of their time, I'm thinking like Mesopotamia or something, spent all of their time building wooden frames, filling them with a clay, a specific type of clay, and then using a wooden stylus, a stick, to write in the clay. The scribe class, and record what was going on with the granaries, with the taxes, with the law, with the war. All right. And those people did not spend their time out in the field cultivating wheat. All right. Flash forward to 2024, we are a highly stratified, highly specialized society, here in the West. Okay. Because most people don't know how to change the oil on their car. I grew up in a generation in which you did. In fact, I grew up in a generation in which auto mechanics was a required course, as well as wood and metal working. And I'm not that old. Okay, so things are changing very rapidly. So as stratification multiplies it, as you get more in the way of specialized occupation, and as it solidifies, so people in this strata do this and they don't do that. So, computer programmers do computer programming, but they don't do plumbing, and plumbers don't do computer programming, and so on and so forth. This solidifies identity. Okay. And so now this is not like unique to the 21st century, but as the rigidity and the multiplicity of our strata grows, identity becomes more and more important. And in political science, and going way back to the Greeks, we're talking about the 4th century BC, they sort of picked up on this, that when people come together and they start these stratification of occupation, this is the foundation of a city, of the polis, from which the study political science, and science from the Latin word scientia, to know, or the knowing. So the knowing about the life in the city. political science. Okay, when it comes from whence it comes from. So identity is absolutely crucial. Now, I wanna say something else to you. I want to make a recommendation. Are you familiar with the author Jordan Peterson? Okay, he's a psychologist. He's somewhat of a YouTube phenomenon. He's a speaker. He works now with the news organization Daily Wire, and he has 4 books. Okay, and the first of which I highly recommend. It's called Maps of Meaning. It is I will tell you, it is a complicated book, but it is one that is well worth your time. All right, and in this book, it's a deep dive into how across geographical and chronological spans, different places, different times, the patterns of a human perspective behavior that manifests meaning. How is it that we make sense out of who we are and why in the heck we're here? Okay, very interesting book. And so then he goes on to write the 212 Rules book. Well, he's got a new book out, and I just started it because it was just released. Okay, and I want to plug this to you. The name of the book is We Who Wrestle with God. No, I don't get anything if you buy the book. Okay, it's not like that. All right, but in this book, Jordan Peterson begins from the perspective, I believe correctly, that each period of time has its own problems, usually several, but each period in a civilization has a particular problem. Among the problems that it has, there's one that stands out. Okay, and in many ways, the one that stands out, it becomes the causal factor, the independent variable for these other problems. This is the thing, that's causing the outcome of these other problems. Jordan Peterson believes, and I tend to agree with him, excuse me, that in this first quarter of the 21st century in the West, our central problem is one of meaning. That is the question of who are we and why are we here? And he points out early on in the book that the very existence, the very rise of identity politics, or the very existence, the very rise of people that say, well, my pronouns are, and look, I may, I have my thoughts on the trueness or not of some of these modes of believing, but as a researcher, you and I, we have to look at these things analytically. We can't just go, oh, that sounds crazy, Zizem or whatever. Maybe you don't, okay, or you just can't say, oh wow, that's a great idea, Zizem, Tweedledee. All right, ask the question, why? Why is it popping up that whole groups of folks, institutions, companies, educational places are asking people to select pronouns to tack onto their email? What's driving this? Dr. Peterson's perspective is that it's a crisis of meaning, which in itself is a crisis of identity. We don't know why we're here and what it is we're supposed to be doing. And when you can't answer that question, you cannot answer the one that flows from the answer to that question, and that is, who am I? I believe he's correct. All right. I mean, just, this isn't the first time he's mentioned this. All right. But this book is a much, much deeper dive. So if you're looking for a read over the Christmas break, let me recommend that one to you. Okay. Question number 3. Excuse me. From the chapter Trade-offs in Measuring Identities, Comparison of 5 Approaches, pick one of these experimental techniques suggested to measure identity. Briefly summarize the technique and discuss why you would use it as a research method. Okay, Robin, let's take you. One of the experimental techniques described by Sullivan and Metcalfe, SKS, is discourse analysis. Okay, good. That's a very common one within qualitative research. This method analyzes text in a qualitative way by looking in depth at how they explain the world, because it is key to understanding their identities. Boom, excellent. Okay, and discourse analysis, that can be done through content analysis. That is, you look for certain words and certain phrases that reveal the meaning that's being sort of rolled around in the conversation, whether it's between two entities or a whole group of them. All right, and it just so happens, this is a good example, Robin. It just so happens that you're living in a time and place in which whole groups of individuals will produce massive amounts of data for you to look at. All right, you might be saying, "Oh, where do I find this data, good sir?" Go to any video, and especially videos that are touching on particular social phenomena, whether it's political or something else. Look at the comments. Look at the comments. Okay, and you find this discourse, especially for platforms that allow open comments, which is an insane idea, but there you go. As someone who runs a website, do I allow unauthorized, unregulated comments? No. All right. Question number 4. Why, according to Pearson, are the trends in politics much harder to measure than those in economics? Do you agree? And I have to be honest, I don't know that I entirely agree with that perspective, but that's not the question. Okay, William, let's take a look at you. Well met. While in economics, the pricing mechanisms and short durations of causal chains, a tendency to repetitive interactions, offers useful and easily understood metrics, the consistent and rigorous measurement of political trends is much more problematic. Political actors establish their own goals, which may or may not be clearly or concisely defined. Measuring the performance of political institutions is a complex endeavor requiring the analyst to be able to identify what parts of the political system are failing or succeeding and why. Yeah. Okay. Excellent answer. Karina, let's take a look at you. Pearson explains that politics is much harder to explain. Politics is much harder to explain than economics because of the complexity of politics. Since economics has such a quantifiable aspect, it makes it much easier to explain. Politics, on the other hand, as varying factors can make it hard to quantify or identify a single causal explanation of certain aspects, or you can say of dependent variables. I agree with Pearson in this aspect because even though both politics and economics are ever changing, it's easier to look at economic trends than political ones. Okay. Now, excuse me, that is the perspective of the author. Okay. And in this last election cycle, we saw some of that. Okay. Ann Seltzer was a pollster, and I say was because she's out now, who lived in Iowa, and she worked, hired out her services to such clients as the Des Moines Register, which is a sort of a paper of record people look at not only in the state but nationally to look which way the political winds are blowing. The primaries are always held first in Iowa. Something. Anybody here, from the class from Iowa, something about Iowans? What is it, in the water or it's in the dirt or whatever? Okay. But she released a poll a few days from the election, which in her poll suggested that Kamala Harris was going to beat Trump in the state of Iowa by 3 points. Well, as it turned out, Vice President Harris did not beat former President Trump by 3 points. In fact, the swing went dramatically the other way, and she was off by like 13 points. She resigned. She quit. Okay, now she says that she had been planning to get out of the polling business because it can be very, it's first of all very intense work, and especially when around election times, people want polls like yesterday or it's a lot of hard work. So she claims that she had thoughts to already get out before this election, and it's funny because one reporter said, "Well, it just seems like a strange coincidence that you would issue a poll that was 13 points off and then resign." To which, in true researcher fashion, Ann Seltzer said, "Well, correlation is not causation." Bam. I love that. Okay. Is it true that politics are harder to study than economics. Well, on the one hand, yes, back to why did Van Gogh lop off his ear? People are complicated. Okay, it's hard to determine and detect what they're going to do. Okay, and here's where I differ with the author, however. Economics is yet another expression of human behavior. So if we're talking about economics and policy from the Fed, okay, that's one thing. But we're talking about economics in terms of buying behavior, that can be complicated. For instance, I was reading over the weekend some of the news, and as people are trying to figure out what to do post-election, and I haven't done this at all, but I'll tell you, I do a lot of writing and political commentary out in the media universe. I have an article up, a piece that I wrote, and I did a media appearance yesterday. Okay, if you go to my X account, and that's you know how to look up an X account, right? It's at, all right. So if you go to at Jeff Gardner, or excuse me, at Gardner Writes, and that's like writes, like scribbles, WRITES, at Gardner Writes. Okay, that's my X account. And there you can find a link to the show appearance that I did, but also a link back to my webpage, upon which I posted the article. And my webpage is jeffgardner.online. Okay. The article focused on how it is that the pollsters got things really wrong, and how it is that in the social sciences, things are often gotten really wrong, and why we should be concerned about that, the replication crisis. See, outside of us doing this sort of stuff, classes, most people have never heard of this. Most people don't know that within the social sciences, whether it's because the methodology was bad or the data was bad, or it was just a fluke, that somewhere between 30 and 70% of the studies that are released in the social sciences cannot be replicated. They can't be repeated. Well, because I don't mean, oh, it's impossible to set this up. But when someone tries to do it, they get dramatically different results. Well, that's not a good study. Okay, what's going on there, and why should we care? Okay, that's what the piece is about. So I'm looking at that, I posted that, what's now Wednesday? I posted that up Monday, Tuesday. But I was looking at things over the weekend about it, and I come across this article about so-called doom spending, like doom scrolling, except for now people are just going out and buying stuff. It said, and again, it's always hard to get through the distortion of language that now dominates the media, because they say, a viral trend. Okay, well, what's the qualifier for that? What constitutes viral TikTok trend? Is this like one post with 5 likes? Or are we talking about 1,000 posts with 5 million? Where's the bar when we analyze this? Okay, it's just not. It's just all over the place. So I take that with a grain of salt, but I look at the story, and that is people that are going, oh, Vice President Kamala Harris lost and Donald J. Trump won. So what's the point? And I'll never be able to afford anything, and what's going to happen? So I might as well spend money now. Okay. Now, again, I'm not criticizing anyone. I'm looking at this as a researcher, and I'm not saying, oh, you sillies, everything's going to be fine and Trump will make things. No. We're looking at behavior. Okay. All right. As a researcher, that would be very hard to study, because it's like, wait. Because one would assume, by way of economic behavior, if a person or persons, how big this trend is, we don't know, persons or persons wish to buy a home in future America, they would save money rather than saying, oh, I don't think I can buy a home, therefore I'll go out and spend more money. That in itself, poses some difficulty. By way of cause and effect, studying the phenomenon. You see what I mean? So depending on what type of economic activity you're talking about, in my professional opinion, it can be just as difficult to study and get your hands around as a researcher as is politics, because they're both about human behavior, which, as you know, is complicated. Okay, everybody, I am way over by almost 10 minutes, my 30 minutes. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. Work on your papers. Everybody stay focused in these last 14-ish days. Okay, you're doing great. I'm thinking about you. I'm praying about you. And I will see you on Canvas. God bless. Bye-bye.